Jack Harper sat at the small dining table in his apartment, absently stirring the pasta on his plate. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual evening energy: honking cars, distant chatter, and the occasional siren weaving through the hum of New York City. Across from him, Emily smiled softly as she adjusted the centerpiece, a tiny potted plant she had nurtured for weeks. It was her pride and joy, a splash of green life amidst the concrete jungle they called home. "You're quiet tonight," Emily said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a warmth that always made Jack feel grounded. "Something on your mind?" He looked up, blinking as if pulled back from another world. "Not really," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." Emily tilted her head, studying him. She knew better than to push when Jack clammed up like this. He had always been the quieter one, content to observe rather than speak. But lately, something about him seemed off. Maybe it was the way he kept glancing out the window, his brow furrowed as though searching for something beyond the skyline. The two finished their meal in comfortable silence, the kind only shared by people who truly understood each other. Afterward, Emily cleared the dishes while Jack wandered to the living room. He stood by the large window, gazing out at the glowing cityscape stretched before him. The lights twinkled like stars. But tonight, something felt different. In the corner of his eye, he caught movement, a flicker in the sky, almost too quick to notice. "What was that?" he muttered under his breath, leaning closer to the glass. For a moment, he thought he saw shapes darting between the buildings, dark silhouettes against the night. They weren't birds, that much he was sure of. His heart skipped a beat, and he blinked hard, wondering if fatigue was playing tricks on him. When he looked again, the shapes were gone. "Jack!" Emily's voice startled him. She appeared behind him, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said quickly, stepping away from the window. "Just thought I saw." "Never mind. Probably nothing." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. Later that night, as Emily drifted off to sleep beside him, Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The flickering lights haunted him, refusing to leave his thoughts. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, scrolling through news apps half-heartedly. Most headlines were typical: politics, sports, celebrity gossip. Nothing unusual. Yet, buried near the bottom of one site, he found an article that caught his attention. Unexplained drones spotted over major cities worldwide. The accompanying photo showed grainy images of what looked like metallic discs hovering above landmarks. Experts speculated they could be experimental military tech or elaborate hoaxes. Jack frowned, scrolling further. A comment section below erupted with theories ranging from government conspiracies to alien invasions. Normally, he would have dismissed such talk as nonsense. But tonight, the idea didn't seem so far-fetched. His phone buzzed suddenly, startling him. A notification flashed across the screen, a text message from an unknown number. Curious, he tapped it open. The message read, "You really thought bombing us would work? Cute. Watch this." Jack froze, his blood running cold. Who would send something like that? And what did it mean? Bombing who? Us? Watch what? Before he could process it further, the phone vibrated again. This time, it was a video link. Hesitant, Jack clicked play. Grainy footage filled the screen, showing strange ships descending from the sky, unleashing beams of light onto cities below. Explosions lit up the horizon, followed by screams and chaos. "No way," Jack whispered, his hands trembling. He turned to wake Emily, but stopped himself. What could he even say? That aliens might attack. That some random text warned him first. She'd think he was losing it. Instead, he set the phone down and stared into the darkness, his mind racing. Whatever was coming, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world was about to change forever. And not for the better. The next morning, Jack woke to a sound that sent chills down his spine, a deep, rumbling boom that shook the entire apartment. Emily jolted awake beside him, her eyes wide with confusion. "What was that?" she gasped, clutching the blanket. "I don't know," Jack replied, already out of bed and rushing to the window. He pulled back the curtain, and what he saw made his stomach drop. The sky, once clear and bright, was now filled with dark shapes. Massive ships hovering ominously over the city. Their sleek metallic surfaces gleamed in the sunlight as they moved with eerie precision. "Jack, what's happening?" Emily asked, joining him at the window. Her voice trembled, and Jack could feel her hand gripping his arm tightly. Before he could answer, another explosion echoed in the distance. This time, it came from the direction of a military base on the outskirts of the city. Smoke began rising into the air, painting the horizon gray. Sirens wailed outside, growing louder by the second. People poured into the streets, shouting and running in panic. "We need to get out of here," Jack said firmly, grabbing his phone and shoving it into his pocket. He turned to Emily, who looked pale but determined. "Grab whatever you can carry. We'll head to the shelter downtown." Emily nodded and quickly packed a small bag with essentials: water, snacks, a flashlight, and some clothes. Jack did the same, keeping one eye on the chaos unfolding outside. The alien ships continued their assault, firing beams of light that left craters where buildings once stood. The ground shook with each impact, and the air smelled of smoke and burning metal. As they stepped into the hallway, they found their neighbors scrambling toward the stairs. Elevators were useless now. Power flickered unpredictably. The building's superintendent, an older man named Mr. Harris, tried to keep everyone calm. "Stay together," he shouted. "Head for the basement if you can't leave the building." But Jack knew the basement wouldn't be safe for long. They needed to get as far away from the city as possible. Pushing through the crowd, he led Emily downstairs and out onto the street. The scene was pure pandemonium. Cars honked wildly as drivers abandoned their vehicles in gridlock traffic. Pedestrians ran in every direction, desperate to escape the destruction raining down from above. Suddenly, a deafening roar filled the air. Jack glanced up just in time to see one of the alien ships release a massive energy blast. It struck a nearby skyscraper, sending shards of glass and debris flying in all directions. People screamed as the building collapsed, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "Move," Jack yelled, pulling Emily behind a parked car for cover. Dust and rubble rained down around them, coating everything in a thick layer of grit. When the dust settled slightly, Jack peeked out cautiously. The road ahead was blocked by fallen debris, forcing them to find another route. "This way," he said, guiding Emily down a narrow alley. They weaved through side streets, avoiding the main roads where the aliens seemed to focus their attacks. Along the way, they passed others fleeing in terror, families carrying children, elderly people struggling to keep up, even pets trailing behind their owners. Despite the chaos, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the message he'd received the night before. "You really thought bombing us would work? Cute. Watch this." Whoever, or whatever, had sent it clearly knew this attack was coming. But why warn him? And how? His thoughts were interrupted when Emily stumbled over a piece of broken concrete. Jack caught her before she fell, steadying her. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice betrayed her fear. "Just don't let go of me, all right?" "I won't," Jack promised, squeezing her hand reassuringly. They pressed on, dodging collapsing structures and bursts of energy from the alien weapons. Each step felt like a gamble, but giving up wasn't an option. As they reached the edge of the city, Jack spotted a group of soldiers setting up barricades. Relief washed over him. They weren't alone in this fight. But as he watched the soldiers exchange fire with the invaders, he realized something important. Humanity might have been caught off guard, but it wasn't defeated yet. Not while there were still people willing to stand and fight. Jack and Emily reached the soldiers just as another explosion rocked the area. The ground shook violently, forcing them to take cover behind a crumbling wall. Smoke filled the air, stinging their eyes and making it hard to breathe. Despite the chaos, Jack noticed the soldiers were organized. Some fired at the alien ships with heavy weapons, while others helped civilians move to safer locations. "Over here," one of the soldiers shouted, waving them closer. He was a young man, no older than his mid-20s, with dirt smudged across his face. "We're evacuating people to the train station. It's fortified and underground. You'll be safer there." Jack nodded and helped Emily stand. They followed the soldier through the chaos, weaving between burning cars and piles of debris. As they moved, Jack couldn't help but glance back at the alien ships. They hovered silently now, almost as if watching humanity's response. The sight sent a shiver down his spine. At the train station, things were slightly calmer. Refugees huddled together, sharing what little food and water they had. Volunteers handed out blankets and directed people to makeshift shelters deeper inside the tunnels. Emily immediately began helping where she could, tending to frightened children and comforting those in shock. Jack watched her for a moment, proud of her strength despite everything. Then he remembered the message on his phone. Pulling it out, he opened the video again. The footage showed cities around the world under attack. Tokyo, London, Paris, all struck by the same alien forces. It wasn't just New York. This was global. But why had he been targeted with the warning? Was it random, or did someone think he could do something about it? As he stared at the screen, a voice startled him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jack turned to see a man standing nearby. He was tall, with sharp features and dark hair streaked with gray. His clothes were plain, a simple jacket and jeans, but his presence demanded attention. "Who are you?" Jack asked, instinctively stepping back. "My name is David Monroe," the man replied calmly, "and I believe you've already received a message from me." Jack's heart raced. "You sent that text?" David nodded. "Yes, and I need your help." Before Jack could respond, Emily approached, concern written all over her face. "Jack, who is this?" "This is David," Jack said hesitantly. "He claims he knows something about all of this." David extended a hand to Emily. "Nice to meet you. I wish it were under better circumstances." Turning back to Jack, he continued, "We don't have much time. If we're going to stop these invaders, we'll need to act fast." "Stop them," Jack repeated, incredulous. "How?" "Look around you. We're barely surviving." David didn't flinch. "Because we prepared for this. Years ago, a group of scientists and engineers, including yourself, developed advanced technology specifically designed to counter extraterrestrial threats. Project Phoenix." Jack froze. He remembered working on prototypes years earlier, but the project had been shut down due to lack of funding. "That was abandoned," he said slowly. "It never went anywhere." "It did," David corrected. "We kept working in secret. Now, it's our only chance. But reactivating it requires someone who understands the systems inside and out. Someone like you." Emily stepped forward. "Wait a minute. You want him to risk his life based on some half-baked plan?" "It's not half-baked," David said firmly. "It's our best shot. These aliens won't stop until they've wiped us out. Trust me, I've seen what they're capable of." Jack looked between David and Emily, torn. On one hand, staying meant risking his life for a mission that sounded impossible. On the other, doing nothing meant waiting for the inevitable. Finally, he sighed. "All right. What do I need to do?" David smiled faintly. "First, we get you to the facility. It's hidden deep in the mountains. From there, we can activate Project Phoenix and turn the tide." "Hidden?" Emily asked, crossing her arms. "Who exactly are you people?" "We're survivors," David said simply. "And now so are you. Let's make sure Earth stays that way." As they prepared to leave, Jack felt a mix of fear and determination. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Giving up wasn't an option. Not anymore. The journey to the hidden facility was anything but easy. Jack, Emily, and David left the train station under the cover of darkness, avoiding the main roads where alien ships still prowled. They traveled on foot, sticking to narrow alleys and abandoned buildings. The city felt like a graveyard now, silent except for the occasional rumble of collapsing structures or distant explosions. David led the way, moving with purpose despite the danger. He carried a small backpack filled with supplies, including a map marked with their route. Occasionally, he would stop to check their position, glancing at the stars above when the smoke cleared enough to see them. Jack walked beside him, his mind racing with questions about Project Phoenix and how it could possibly save humanity. Emily stayed close behind, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of trouble. After hours of walking, they reached the outskirts of the city. Here, the destruction was less severe, though the scars of war were still visible. Burnt-out cars lined the streets, and power lines hung limp from broken poles. The group paused near an old gas station to rest and regroup. Emily handed out water bottles from the supplies David had brought, and Jack took a moment to study the map. "We're halfway there," David said quietly, tracing the path with his finger. "But the hardest part is yet to come. Once we hit the mountains, the terrain gets rough." Jack nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. What happens if this doesn't work? If Project Phoenix fails? "It won't fail," David replied firmly. "We've spent years preparing for this. All we need is for you to activate it." Emily frowned, clearly uneasy. "And what about us? What role do we play in all this?" "You stay alive," David said, meeting her gaze. "Survivors are just as important as soldiers right now. We'll need people to rebuild once this is over." His words didn't entirely reassure her, but she didn't argue. Instead, she focused on staying alert, keeping watch while the others rested. The night dragged on, cold and unforgiving, but eventually they pressed forward again. By dawn, they reached the base of the mountains. The landscape changed dramatically here. Dense forests stretched as far as the eye could see, interrupted only by jagged peaks rising into the sky. David consulted the map one last time before leading them onto a narrow trail that wound upward. The climb was steep and exhausting, especially for Emily, who wasn't used to such physical exertion. But she pushed through, determined not to slow them down. As they ascended, Jack noticed something strange. A faint hum in the air, almost imperceptible at first, but growing stronger the higher they went. He mentioned it to David, who simply smiled. "That's the facility. It's powered by geothermal energy. You can feel it when you're close enough." Finally, after what felt like hours, they arrived at a rocky ledge overlooking a valley. Hidden within the trees below was a massive steel door embedded into the mountainside. It looked impenetrable, designed to withstand even the most brutal attacks. David approached it and entered a code into a keypad beside the entrance. With a low groan, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. "Welcome to the Resistance," David said, gesturing for them to follow. Inside, the facility was a maze of tunnels and rooms filled with advanced technology. Monitors displayed real-time data about the alien attacks, while engineers worked tirelessly to maintain systems. Jack felt a surge of awe and pressure as he realized the scale of what they were dealing with. "This is incredible," he murmured, taking it all in. "It's our last hope," David reminded him. "Now, let's get you briefed. Time is running out." Emily watched silently, her expression a mix of wonder and worry. She knew Jack was stepping into something far bigger than himself, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their lives would never be the same again. Inside the facility, Jack was led to a large control room filled with blinking screens and humming machines. Engineers moved quickly between stations, typing commands and analyzing data. The air smelled faintly of metal and electricity, and the tension in the room was palpable. David stood beside Jack, explaining the situation in a calm but urgent tone. "Project Phoenix is our counterattack," David began, pointing to a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a network of satellites orbiting Earth, each equipped with powerful weapons designed to target alien technology. These satellites were built years ago, but they've been dormant ever since funding dried up. Your job is to reactivate them. Jack studied the display, his mind racing. He recognized the design. It was based on prototypes he'd worked on before the project was shut down. I remember this system, he said slowly. But reactivating it isn't as simple as flipping a switch. There are layers of encryption and firewalls to bypass. That's why we need you, David replied. You know these systems better than anyone. We'll help however we can, but the final steps have to come from you. As Jack nodded, another person entered the room, a woman named Sarah Blake. She had short, dark hair and an air of quiet confidence. David introduced her as a former Air Force pilot who now served as part of the resistance. Sarah will assist you, he added. She knows the protocols and can guide you through the process. Sarah stepped forward and extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Jack. Let's get to work. Over the next few hours, Jack and Sarah pored over schematics and lines of code, working together to bring the satellite network back online. Emily stayed nearby, watching silently as they typed furiously on keyboards and discussed technical details she didn't fully understand. Occasionally, she brought them water or snacks, doing what little she could to support them. Despite their efforts, progress was slow. The system had been offline for so long that many components needed repairs. At one point, Jack grew frustrated, slamming his fist on the desk. This isn't going to work if we can't fix the core processor, he muttered. We will, Sarah assured him. Keep going. Every second counts. Meanwhile, updates from outside painted a grim picture. Alien ships continued their assault, targeting cities and military bases around the globe. Refugees streamed into safe zones, desperate for shelter and supplies. The resistance team monitored the attacks closely, relaying information to Jack and Sarah whenever it might affect their work. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, Jack made a breakthrough. Got it, he exclaimed, leaning back in his chair. On the main screen, one of the satellites lit up, signaling that it was operational. Cheers erupted from the engineers in the room. But the celebration was short-lived. A loud alarm blared, and red lights flashed throughout the facility. They'd found us, someone shouted. Jack turned to David, panic rising in his chest. What do we do now? David clenched his jaw, his voice steady despite the chaos. Finish the job. Reactivate the rest of the satellites. We'll hold them off as long as we can. Sarah grabbed a weapon from a nearby rack and headed toward the entrance. Stay focused, Jack. We're counting on you. Emily gripped Jack's arm, her eyes wide with fear. Be careful, she pleaded. I will, he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. As the sounds of battle echoed through the tunnels, Jack returned to the task at hand, knowing that failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity depended on him. The facility shook violently as the alien forces breached the outer defenses. Explosions echoed through the tunnels, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Jack worked feverishly at the control panel, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he tried to reactivate the remaining satellites. Each successful connection brought a small sense of relief, but the pressure was overwhelming. The clock was ticking, and the invaders were getting closer. Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom. They're pushing hard. We can't hold them much longer. Her words were punctuated by the sound of gunfire and shouts in the background. Jack clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't afford distractions. Not now. Emily stayed by his side, holding a flashlight to illuminate the dimly lit control room. Power flickered intermittently, making it harder to see the screens. You're doing great, she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Just a little more. Jack nodded but didn't respond. His mind was racing, calculating every move. 2 satellites were online, but 3 remained dormant. He glanced at the progress bar on the main monitor. It was agonizingly slow. Come on, he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, a man burst into the room, breathing heavily. It was Ryan Cole, another operative who had been helping with the defense. His face was streaked with dirt, and his uniform was torn. "We've got a problem," he said urgently. "There's a traitor among us. Someone's feeding information to the aliens." "What?" Emily gasped, stepping back instinctively. Jack turned to Ryan, his eyes narrowing. "Who?" "I don't know yet," Ryan admitted, "but I found this near one of their entry points." He held up a small device, a transmitter, its red light blinking faintly. "It's been broadcasting our location." Before anyone could react, David appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Ryan's lying," he said firmly. "That transmitter belongs to him." Ryan's face twisted in anger. "You think I'd betray my own people, after everything we've sacrificed?" "It's not about what we think," David replied, pulling out a tablet. On the screen was a video feed showing Ryan placing the device earlier that day. "The cameras caught you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan lunged at David, knocking him to the ground. Chaos erupted as Emily screamed, and Jack jumped to intervene. The struggle lasted only seconds before Sarah arrived, her weapon raised. "Enough," she barked, her voice cutting through the tension. "We don't have time for this." Ryan froze, glaring at everyone in the room. "Fine," he spat. "You want a traitor? Go ahead and believe your lies. But when they overrun you, don't say I didn't warn you." David stood up, brushing himself off. "Take him to the holding cell. We'll deal with him later." Two guards dragged Ryan away, leaving the group shaken. Jack returned to the control panel, his hands trembling slightly. The betrayal stung, but there was no time to dwell on it. He focused on the task, bringing the fourth satellite online, just as another explosion rocked the facility. "We're almost there," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not fast enough," Sarah muttered, checking her weapon. "They're breaking through the inner doors. We need to buy you more time." Jack hesitated, torn between finishing the job and helping defend the facility. Sarah seemed to read his thoughts. "Stay here," she ordered. "Your work is more important than anything else right now." With that, she ran back toward the fighting, leaving Jack and Emily alone in the control room. Jack swallowed hard, staring at the final satellite status. The progress bar crept forward, inch by inch. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder, closer. Emily gripped his shoulder tightly. "You can do this," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We're counting on you." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. He typed the last command, holding his breath as the system processed it. Finally, the screen flashed green. Satellite network fully operational. A wave of relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Through the commotion, Sarah's voice came over the intercom again. "Jack, it's done. Now get out of there. They're coming for you." Jack grabbed Emily's hand, and together they sprinted toward the exit, knowing the hardest part was still ahead. Jack and Emily ran through the narrow tunnels of the facility, their footsteps echoing against the metal walls. Behind them, the sound of gunfire and alien weapons grew louder with each passing second. The invaders were closing in, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning wires. "Keep moving." Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom, strained but determined. "I'll hold them off as long as I can." Jack didn't respond. His chest burned from running, but he pushed forward, gripping Emily's hand tightly to make sure she stayed close. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into two paths. One led deeper into the mountain, while the other sloped upward toward an emergency exit. "This way," Jack shouted, pulling Emily toward the upward path. He knew they couldn't afford to get trapped underground. If they made it outside, they might have a chance to regroup, or at least find cover. The climb was steep and uneven, forcing them to slow down. Emily stumbled more than once, but Jack steadied her each time, urging her onward. Overhead, the facility groaned under the strain of the attack. Chunks of rock dislodged from the ceiling, crashing to the ground behind them. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the tunnel. Jack and Emily fell to their knees as dust filled the air, choking them. When the rumbling subsided, Jack looked back to see that part of the tunnel had collapsed, blocking their pursuers, for now. But the danger wasn't over. Alien drones buzzed nearby, their glowing eyes scanning the wreckage. "We need to move faster," Jack said, helping Emily stand. His voice was calm, though his heart raced. "They'll find another way around." They pressed on, finally reaching the end of the tunnel. A heavy steel door barred their exit, locked with a keypad. Jack quickly entered the code David had given him earlier. The door hissed open, revealing the cold, fresh air of the mountainside. For a moment, they paused to catch their breath, staring out at the vast expanse of forest below. But there was no time to rest. In the distance, they could see flashes of light, more explosions tearing through the landscape. The aliens weren't just attacking the facility, they were hunting everywhere. Jack scanned the area for any sign of safety. Then he spotted it, a cluster of rocks near the tree line, partially hidden by shadows. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "Over there," Jack whispered, pointing. He and Emily darted toward the rocks, crouching low to avoid detection. As they huddled together, Jack pulled out his phone and accessed the satellite control system remotely. Now that Project Phoenix was online, it was time to test its power. He targeted one of the smaller alien ships hovering above the valley. With a deep breath, he initiated the attack. A bright beam shot down from the sky, striking the ship with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the vessel erupted in a burst of light and debris, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. It worked. Emily breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jack allowed himself a brief smile, but the victory felt hollow. The destruction of one ship wouldn't stop the invasion. Still, it proved that humanity had a fighting chance, and that knowledge gave him strength. Before they could celebrate further, a loud crash echoed behind them. Turning, they saw Sarah limping toward them, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her fingers, staining her shirt. "Had to fall back," she gasped, sinking to the ground beside them. "They're too strong." Emily immediately tore off part of her jacket to help bandage Sarah's wound. "You shouldn't have come after us," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't about to let you face this alone," Sarah replied weakly. She glanced at Jack, her expression serious. "We struck a blow, but they'll retaliate harder. We need to keep moving." Jack nodded, already thinking ahead. The satellites were operational, but without someone to guide them, humanity's advantage would be short-lived. He realized what he had to do next, and it scared him. But fear wouldn't stop him. Not when so much was at stake. The three of them, Jack, Emily, and Sarah, moved cautiously through the forest, sticking to the shadows as they tried to put distance between themselves and the facility. The air was cold, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with roots and rocks that made every step treacherous. Sarah leaned heavily on Jack for support, her face pale from blood loss, but she refused to slow them down. "We need to find shelter," Emily whispered, glancing over her shoulder nervously. The sound of alien drones buzzed faintly in the distance, a constant reminder that they weren't safe yet. "Somewhere we can regroup." "There's an old cabin not far from here," Sarah said weakly. "Used it once during training exercises. It's hidden, hard to spot, unless you know where to look." Jack nodded. "Lead the way." With Sarah guiding them, they pushed deeper into the woods. The journey felt endless, each rustle of leaves or snap of a twig making them flinch. Finally, they reached the cabin, a small weathered structure tucked into a clearing surrounded by dense trees. Its windows were boarded up, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. "Stay alert," Jack warned as he pushed the door open. Inside, the space was cramped but functional. A dusty table stood in the center, surrounded by chairs that looked like they might collapse under weight. Along one wall was a fireplace, its hearth filled with ash from long-forgotten fires. Emily quickly set to work, gathering firewood and lighting a small blaze to warm the room. Jack helped Sarah sit down, then used the last of his jacket to tighten the makeshift bandage around her wound. She winced but didn't complain. "Thanks," she murmured, leaning back against the wall. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. Alien ships roared overhead, their beams of light cutting through the trees. Explosions shook the ground, sending birds scattering into the night sky. Jack clenched his fists, knowing they couldn't stay hidden forever. "We can't just sit here," Emily said, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, though her hands trembled as she wrapped them around a cup of water. "What's next?" Jack hesitated, staring at the satellite control interface on his phone. They'd struck a blow, but it wasn't enough. The aliens were still attacking, and humanity's resistance was crumbling. He realized what needed to be done, and it terrified him. "I have to go back," he said finally, his voice low but resolute. "What?" Emily exclaimed, standing abruptly. "You can't. You'll get yourself killed." "He's right," Sarah interjected, surprising both of them. "The satellites are our only hope, but they need someone to direct them. Someone who knows how they work. That's you, Jack." "But I can't leave you too," Jack protested, looking between them. "Not after everything we've been through." "You don't have a choice," Sarah replied, her tone softening. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone out there fighting to survive. You're the key to turning this around." Emily stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jack pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as if he never wanted to let go. "You won't lose me," he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "I'll come back. I swear." After a few moments, Emily pulled away, wiping her eyes. "Then take this," she said, handing him a small pocket knife. "For luck." Jack smiled faintly, slipping the knife into his pocket. He turned to Sarah. "Take care of her." "You know I will," Sarah replied with a weak grin. With one last glance at Emily, Jack stepped outside. The cool mountain air hit him like a wall, and he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The forest stretched out before him, dark and unforgiving, but he didn't hesitate. One step at a time, he began retracing their path toward the facility, determined to finish what he started, even if it cost him everything. Jack moved quickly through the forest, his every step deliberate but cautious. The moonlight filtered weakly through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. He kept low, avoiding open spaces where alien drones might spot him. Each rustle of leaves or distant explosion made him freeze, his heart pounding as he strained to listen for danger. As he approached the facility, the destruction became evident. The once hidden entrance was now a gaping hole, surrounded by scorched earth and twisted metal. Alien ships hovered nearby, their beams scanning the wreckage for survivors. Jack pressed himself against a tree, watching carefully. He knew sneaking past them would be nearly impossible, but he had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, he darted from cover to cover, using the debris as camouflage. His movements were quick and silent, years of working under pressure sharpening his focus. Still, the tension gnawed at him. One wrong move, one misstep, and it would all be over. Finally, he reached the edge of the facility. A side entrance, partially collapsed, offered a way in. Jack squeezed through the narrow opening, wincing as jagged metal scraped his arms. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, and the hum of damaged machinery filled the silence. The control room wasn't far, but getting there meant navigating through corridors littered with rubble and fallen beams. He paused when he heard voices, alien ones. Their language was sharp and guttural, unlike anything he'd ever heard before. Peering around a corner, he saw two Violet soldiers patrolling the hallway. Their sleek armor reflected what little light remained, and their weapons glowed faintly with energy. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't fight them. He was outnumbered and unarmed. But he couldn't wait either, not if he wanted to save humanity. Spotting a loose pipe on the ground, Jack picked it up quietly. Timing his move perfectly, he hurled the pipe down the opposite end of the corridor. The clang echoed loudly, drawing the aliens' attention. They turned and marched toward the noise, giving Jack just enough time to slip past unnoticed. Reaching the control room, Jack found it in disarray. Monitors flickered erratically, and cables dangled from the ceiling like vines. Despite the chaos, the main console was still operational. He sat down, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed the satellite network. The system responded immediately, awaiting his commands. "Let's finish this," he muttered under his breath. Targeting the largest alien ship, a command vessel, he initiated the attack. The satellites responded instantly, firing concentrated beams of energy that pierced through the ship's defenses. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the vessel shuddered violently, its surface cracking under the strain. With a deafening roar, it exploded into a fiery inferno, sending shockwaves rippling through the atmosphere. The impact was immediate. The smaller ships faltered, their coordination disrupted without the command vessel's guidance. Jack seized the opportunity, targeting them one by one. Each strike weakened the invaders further, turning the tide of the battle. But victory came at a cost. An alarm blared suddenly, warning of critical damage to the facility's reactor. Jack realized it wouldn't hold much longer. He had minutes, maybe less, to escape. Grabbing his phone, he sent a final message to Emily and Sarah. "It's done. Get clear." As he ran back through the crumbling tunnels, sections of the ceiling collapsed behind him, blocking his path. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Just as he thought he wouldn't make it, he spotted the emergency exit ahead. Summoning the last of his strength, he sprinted toward it. Bursting outside, he collapsed onto the cold ground, gasping for air. Behind him, the facility imploded in a massive fireball, lighting up the night sky. Jack shielded his face, feeling the heat wash over him. When the rumbling subsided, he looked back at the devastation, and then toward the horizon, where dawn was beginning to break. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile. They had struck back. Humanity had fought back. And though the road ahead would be long, hope burned brighter than ever. The sunrise painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the destruction that surrounded Jack. He sat on a rocky ledge overlooking what was left of the facility, his body aching from exhaustion, but his mind clear for the first time in days. The air smelled of smoke and ash, but beneath it there was a faint freshness, a promise of renewal. Emily and Sarah found him not long after. They had followed his message and stayed far enough away to avoid the explosion. When they saw him, alive and safe, Emily ran to him, tears streaming down her face. She hugged him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "You didn't," Jack replied, holding her just as tightly. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the weight of everything he'd been through. "We did it. We fought back." Sarah approached more slowly, leaning on a makeshift crutch. Her wound was still fresh, but her expression was one of quiet pride. "You saved us," she said simply. "All of us." Jack shook his head. "Not just me. Everyone who stood their ground. Everyone who refused to give up. They're the real heroes." For a moment, none of them spoke. They simply watched the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. It felt like a new beginning, though they all knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The aliens weren't gone entirely. Scattered ships still lingered in the distance, regrouping or retreating. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As the hours passed, survivors began emerging from hiding. Refugees trickled out of the woods and nearby towns, drawn by the sight of the destroyed alien command vessel. Word spread quickly. Humanity had struck back, and the invaders were no longer invincible. People cheered, some cried, and others simply stared in stunned silence at the wreckage around them. Jack, Emily, and Sarah joined a group of volunteers helping to organize the survivors. Food and medical supplies were distributed, while engineers worked to repair communication systems. Slowly, order began to return. Emily channeled her energy into tending to the injured, using her calm demeanor to comfort those in pain. Jack stayed close, offering guidance whenever needed, but also taking time to rest. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to feel something other than fear, hope. That night, as they camped under the stars, David appeared. His clothes were torn, and his face bore signs of fatigue, but his eyes gleamed with determination. "You've done something incredible," he told Jack. "But this isn't the end. The Valeth will come again. We need to prepare." Jack nodded, knowing David was right. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together." David smiled faintly. "Good, because Earth needs people like you." Later, as the fire crackled softly and the survivors settled into an uneasy sleep, Jack stared up at the sky. The stars seemed brighter now, untainted by the alien ships that had once loomed above. But amidst the beauty, he noticed something, a faint transmission crackling through the static on his phone. The message was short, chilling, and unmistakable. "We'll be watching." Jack frowned, gripping the device tightly. He glanced at Emily, who lay sleeping beside him, her chest rising and falling gently. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. Humanity had proven its resilience, its ability to rise even when pushed to the brink. The screen faded to black, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. In the distance, the ruins of the facility stood as a reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained. The fight wasn't over, but for now, there was peace, and sometimes peace was enough.